All right. All right, we'll call to order the second planning commission meeting of June. Can I get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Sholay,
Here.
Moyer,
Here.
Knack,
Here.
Carmen,
Here.
McCaffrey, Whitehouse,
Here.
Sarter.
Here. Any additions or deletions from the agenda tonight?
None from staff.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. We'll move on to public forum. This is non-agenda items. So if you're here to speak on either Saddleback or the business center, there will be time for public comment for that later. This is anything else. If anybody wishes to have the mic for something non-related to those two issues. Nothing? Okay, perfect. We will move on to new business. The first agenda item is a rezone and a preliminary replat of the Saddleback subdivision. This is a public hearing tonight, so we do have kind of an order of operations to go through. Before we get started on anything, I just want to ask the board members if there are any conflicts of interest or any ex parte communications anyone needs to disclose.
No.
Okay.
No.
Just in the interest of transparency, I do serve on an HOA board with the applicant tonight. It is not for Saddleback. It has absolutely nothing to do with Saddleback. It is a totally unrelated volunteer position. It will not impact my ability to make a fair judgment on this agenda item tonight, just so we're all aware. Okay, if nobody else has anything else, I'll turn it over to Cody for town staff introductions.
Thank you, Chairman Sarter. Cody Byrd, Planning Director. Wanted to go over just a couple housekeeping items for this first application. It's being presented as one development proposal. There are two parts. It's a rezoning request for the Saddleback subdivision that was approved in 2018. There's a rezone request to change the zoning from the existing R2, which is single family low density, to the request is to R3 single family medium density. The nature of that request is geared primarily towards the lot sizes that are the smaller lot sizes and narrower lot widths that are allowed under the R3 zoning as opposed to the R2 zoning. That's what's driving that rezone request. The second part of this development proposal is a preliminary plat that's being presented in conjunction with the rezone request to illustrate the way the existing property is proposed to be reconfigured to those narrower lots and slightly smaller lots for some purposes that we're going to get into here in just a moment. So there are two components, the rezone and the preliminary plat. Both are public hearing items. They're being presented as one development proposal. When the Planning Commission reviews items that are public hearings, I wanted to just quickly go over what those procedures look like as a reminder and for those in the audience to participate. So staff will do a brief introduction of the application and its parts. And following staff, the applicant will also present their information concerning their development proposal. Following the presentations, the Planning Commission might ask some general questions pertaining to what was presented, just for clarifying effect. The public hearing portion will then be, the chairman will open the floor to public comments, and members of the public will have up to 3 minutes each to speak. And following the public comments, the applicant will have a chance to respond to those comments. Staff will make final closing remarks, and then the Planning Commission will have the opportunity to ask questions, deliberate, and make a motion. Are there any questions on the procedures for a public hearing item?
Can you clarify between general questions and questions after the hearing closes?
Yeah, so general questions are usually things like procedural elements, code related questions, clarifying questions. Like I think I heard this in the presentation. Could you tell us what that meant? Things of that nature. It's different than deliberations where the Planning Commission is actually getting into the substance of the development proposal, and the deliberation and kind of it includes the back and forth amongst the planning commissioners to weigh and evaluate the development proposal, as opposed to just a quick question like, what did that mean? What did that term mean? Something like that effect.
Thank you for the clarification.
Of course. I've got a presentation here and it's not quite loaded up, but I'm getting there. I didn't see the option, or maybe I was talking through it. Oh, there it is. Too many windows open. And this is the part where I sit and wait for the little wheel to spin as it's allowing me to enter the meeting. So the PowerPoint presentation is pretty high level in nature. And we're super close to getting it up here. There we go. So here it is. As I mentioned a moment ago, the public hearing items for rezone and replat are for Saddleback subdivision. Saddleback subdivision is, I think the staff report indicated half a mile east of I-25. It might be a little bit more than that. We'll verify the exact distance, but the property is north of County Road 60, which is GW Bush Avenue. And it's east of the existing Park Meadows and Meadows subdivision. The applicant for this particular case is Mr. Darren Roberson of Sage Homes, and in this case, the legal entity is SH Holding of Colorado LLC. So here's your, excuse me, here's your location map and the site exhibit to illustrate that location. Again, if there was an error in the exact distance, it could have been copy and paste, but this is the site. It's an undeveloped platted subdivision just east of the Meadows on County Road 60, which is GW Bush Avenue. The existing zoning of the property is R2 residential low density. The existing zoning was assigned at the time the property was annexed into the town. And that zoning was requested at the time when, before the town's land use codes had changed, the R2 was the residential medium density designation. The R2 zoning, as part of our comprehensive plan update and land use code update process, some titles changed, some of the lot dimensions changed across the board to recalibrate all of our residential zone categories to what they are today based on desire for change and to create more distinction between those different zoning categories. So after this particular subdivision was annexed and zoned and platted, the final plat was approved in 2018. Subsequent to that, the property hasn't developed and the town's codes have changed. The applicant is now taking a look at the bigger picture for this particular subdivision to in an effort to make sure that it can be financially viable in today's marketplace with those changing circumstances. And they're requesting to rezone and replat. As I mentioned, and there's more detail in the staff report, the rezone request is really geared at, the applicant is asking, can we reduce the lot sizes and make the lots narrower to fit a different housing model type than what was originally contemplated. At the time in 2018, town administration was really pushing for some larger lots to get some different variety of lot types within the town. And while we still think that that's a good thing to provide that different variety for the lot sizes and provide some different options, knowing now what we didn't know then, may not be the right application for this particular property. This property does not have a non-potable well source on it. And so those large lots would be relying on town treated water for irrigation purposes, which, as many of us know, could become fairly problematic from a cost standpoint, both for development of the site to keep those houses at an affordable market rate, and also the ongoing operational costs for homeowners to irrigate, large lawns up to 19,000 square feet using town treated water. Not exactly the position that those homeowners may want to be in, and not exactly the position the town would like to be in for providing that much water for outdoor irrigation using our treated water supply. So some of those combination of factors has caused the applicant to rethink this particular subdivision and submit the proposal to change. As I point out on the slide here, the Rezone and the replat should really be considered as a single development proposal. The R3 zoning that's requested does allow higher densities, including multifamily and townhomes. But we wanted to make it clear that staff does not support townhomes and multifamily for this particular location. We do support the overall development proposal that the applicant has presented, which includes the replat. The rezone and the replat should really be integrally tied together for consideration of this meeting. And the preliminary plat, which we'll get to here in a moment, is trying to honor the existing lot layout, subdivision layout, and design intent of the original subdivision. There's relatively minimal changes from a land use standpoint. It's really the smaller lots and narrower lots to create the addition of 58 new lots within the same subdivision, but honoring the original layout and intent. From a zoning perspective, those additional lots that could be created through this development proposal is still overall under the density of the existing zoning at 3.72 dwelling units per acre. So it's well within the R2 zoning characteristics. The R2 zoning just doesn't allow the lot size that's being requested for this particular development proposal. And there's the text version of what I just explained. So I should have jumped this slide. Perhaps the important component of the changes for the lot size, as I mentioned, the irrigation water scenario, the overall changes to the site that are proposed would allow the lots to be a little bit narrower to fit what the developer thinks would meet market conditions. And it also proposes reducing the depth of those lots. Some of the lots on average are currently platted to about 140 feet in depth. And that's a pretty deep lot for that narrower proposed lot configuration. At the end of the day, what the proposal contemplates is shortening the depth of those lots, and that space would be converted to HOA common area and open space, proposed for native vegetation that would have a much lower irrigation requirement, probably just for establishment of the vegetation. And after established, it would require very little supplemental water for irrigation purposes. As the town staff was evaluating the proposal, we look at a number of things, including your planning commission's findings for approval. One of those findings is the comprehensive plan. We highlight in the slides here, and the staff report goes into a little bit more depth on each of the findings. But the comprehensive plan is an important piece of this. And so we wanted to highlight, again, the location here. And within the future land use map of the comprehensive plan, this area was identified as low density residential. An important kind of subscript note for planning purposes. When we went through the comprehensive plan update and drafting process, this low density residential was identified as desirable for a lot of the areas of town. And it identified the net density range of up to 6 dwelling units per acre. Once this was adopted in 2021 and we started moving into the land use code adoption process, the regulations that are the rules, the comprehensive plan is the guide, the subdivision regulations and zoning are the rules. When we started drafting the land use code and going through the public hearing process for that adoption, what came out of that process was a desire to kind of sharpen the pencil, if you will, and create a little bit more distinction than what the comprehensive plan had envisioned. And so through that public engagement process for updating the zoning code, we ended up writing the R3s and R2 zones a little bit differently than the densities described in the comprehensive plan. So in finding conformance with the comprehensive plan, the property that's proposed to be rezoned and replatted was identified for low density residential up to 6 dwelling units per acre. The proposal is single family detached dwellings at a density of 3.72 dwelling units per acre. So staff's findings on the zoning and density were that is consistent with the comprehensive plan guidelines. And there's other factors identified in there as well, including identified in the staff report, including the town's water efficiency plan, our infrastructure master plans, our street classification and master plan. All of those documents do support, and the town can support the infrastructure necessary for the proposed rezone and replat as presented. So the next couple of slides, and I don't want to necessarily read through these in, verbatim. They're on the slides. Hopefully everyone can see them. There's a second monitor over here on the wall for those in the audience. But the intent here is to highlight, these are the factors that the Planning Commission considers on a rezone, and these are further detailed in the staff report. I can certainly come back to this if it's helpful, but I also wanted to point out the next slide, which I just switched to. It's hard to see a big difference because it's text heavy. But the second slide here is the findings for approval for a preliminary plat. So I can go back to these as necessary for presentation or review purposes. And overall, I'll kind of conclude with staff's assessment here, just high level, and then I'm certainly happy to go back to staff report for more details. But as overall, staff does support the request to rezone and replat this particular subdivision. That analysis is based on some of the things I just described, but primarily that this is a different way of looking at the same development proposal that the town approved in 2018. The town has more detailed, comprehensive plan, land use regulations, and more information regarding our water infrastructure, our water and wastewater treatment plants, and rethinking what was originally proposed with smaller lots is more supportive of the town's infrastructure goals, primarily the irrigation component of that. The overall request is to change the number of lots from 153 that are platted today to 211, and that change reduces the average lot size, which impacts the irrigation component. Utilizing that additional open space for native areas is beneficial from the town's perspective for our water utilities. And we've followed our rezone and preliminary plat procedures up to the point of public hearing, which is what we're here for tonight. So we'll hear public comments here in just a moment. And our utility plans, which I mentioned a moment ago, I don't want to reiterate that too many times, but that was a consideration for staff. So we do support, and at this point, I think it'd be helpful to move on to the applicant's presentation, unless you have any questions for staff on just the initial presentation.
Anything from the board specifically for Cody?
I have one.
Mhm.
Is it staff's opinion that the water concern is only related to irrigation, not to any other water use for these home sites?
So we took a look at that. That's a great question. There's still some additional steps that will have to be taken as part of development proposals, but the way staff is looking at it currently, I think it's obvious more additional homes will increase indoor water demand. The town's policy currently requires, at the time each lot pulls a building permit, the party pulling the permit has to pay the applicable fees, which includes the indoor component. So the town staff feels we have adequate water supply. We could provide irrigation water for this subdivision as platted. We just don't think that's the most appropriate and best use of the town's water resources. Indoor demand is indoor demand. Households are going to need that water. So the applicant or whoever pulls the permit will have to provide the applicable raw water resources at the time the permits are pulled. For perspective too, the reduction that we're contemplating is impactful for the long range continuity of the town and providing water for indoor and outdoor sources. But I wanted to include too that the timing of this particular development proposal. As many of you know, the town is currently under construction for both a water treatment plant improvement and capacity expansion, as well as a wastewater treatment facility improvements and expansion. Both those projects are currently under construction and their anticipated timeline is completion in summer and fall of 2024. The development proposal here would not impact those construction schedules. We anticipate that those would be completed before permits are ready to be issued for this particular subdivision. The procedures for rezoning and replatting is likely to take through the end of the year. Public improvement for roads, water line installation, design review, construction is going to go into spring or summer of 2024 at the earliest before lots would be ready to issue permits. So I think it's important to highlight that we've definitely thought about the timelines and we don't feel that this particular subdivision would impact the projects that are currently underway for town infrastructure.
Great, thank you. One more question. It's helpful having the difference between the number of lots originally approved and the number of lots that increases. Was the same assessment done on open space as approved? How much does the open space increase with this new proposal?
I don't have the numbers directly in front of me. They are in the staff report, but from memory, I think it was about 4.5 acres increase for the open space areas that would be native vegetation. Mhm.
I have one quick question. Can you refresh my memory on what is the minimum lot size required with an R2 zoning under the current land use code?
I will look that up for you and I will report back to you.
That would be awesome.
Minimum lot size for R2.
For R2, yes.
We'll have another round of questions after the applicant's done, so I'll give you a chance to look that up. Cody. Anything else for staff?
Mr. Byrd, I mean, could you, many people aren't aware of this, but there has been a limit of building permits in the town for a couple of years. And this is also kind of goes back to your point about the timing of when the new water treatment and wastewater treatment plants will be up and running and producing. But there's also, the town has limited building permits to about approximately 100 a year for the last 3 years. So that's part of some of the things that have been done here.
Yeah, that's true. The town has, we've adopted a term in the comprehensive plan and the board of trustees is a strategic plan has a similar term. We call it purposeful growth. That we recognize the desire for the Front Range to continue to grow. And Wellington is not much different there, but we have to work within our existing capacity constraints. A number of years ago, with much community input and strife, I think, to work through all the challenges around water. Staff had identified that our existing capacity for our plants could support about 100 permits per year from that point in the past from 2 or 3 years ago. We have worked with our development community to manage our existing capacities, including some subdivisions slowing down, not starting, and being very cautious with the number of new residential permits that could be issued each year to work within those capacities. So that's definitely a reality that we've worked within, and that was certainly a consideration for timing here to not bring into subdivision development on before the town had capacity to treat for it.
I do have a question. Okay, so it's about 58 more homes that we're looking at. Okay, so 58 less lawns versus 58 more lawns, basically smaller lawns, but more showers. So with having 58 more homes, what does that look for the tap for Wellington in basically tap cost for us? Is that going to bring more revenue in for tap cost?
So overall, every permit that's issued for residential has to pay the town impact fees, building permit fees, and material use tax for each permit application. So increasing the number of applications would increase the revenue to the town for purposes for which it was intended. So each house has to pay for its portion of the town's impact fees based on our current fee schedule. So there's a net gain to the town in the revenue standpoint, but we also have to provide the services associated with what those fees are paying for. So short answer, yes. One of the ways that you might consider looking at that is the overall impact fee increase is for the same property that is currently entitled for 153 lots. So more users, more homes are paying into the same development, the same pipes, the same roads for the infrastructure pieces of that will make those lots more affordable for the end user. You have more lots, higher density paying into the same improvements. The cost to add 58 additional lots in this instance isn't going to add dramatic cost to extend more pipes, more roads, more infrastructure. It's the same geographical area and the same improvements are being provided. You just have more users on them.
Okay, awesome, good. Great.
Real quickly, I wanted to circle back to Ms. Chalet's question. You were asking the minimum lot size for R2 zoning. The minimum lot area per dwelling is 6,600 square feet for detached units in the R2 zone.
Okay, Mr. Bird, you want to go ahead and introduce the applicant as well?
I sure will. So the applicant is Sage Homes. Darren Roberson is the manager for Sage Homes. And accompanying Darren is Tom Dugan with Pinecrest Design. Anyone else presenting? Okay. Okay. Well, Mark Geffro is also with Sage Homes and is available for questions. The new one or the old one? I do. I'll bring it up.
I'm going to try and make this fairly quick so you can ask as many questions as you want, but I think Cody covered pretty much everything that we had to talk about. If you could look at the two drawings we have here, this one on the left is the approved subdivision and the one on the right is the proposed, and you can see that the road layout is identical. And what we've done is we've reduced the lot size and increase the amount of open space by, I believe it's 4.5 acres. And one of the main reasons to do that is to reduce the amount of irrigation water. So with the new lots, we've got about a 50% reduction in treated water that we're going to use for irrigation. So I think that's a huge plus for the town and for the development. The other thing that I just wanted to say is some of the other lots on the proposed or the existing plan are about 19 to 20,000 square feet. The average I think is about 11,000. And the average on the new one is about 50 or 6,500 square feet. So just under the existing R2 zoning. So with that, I think if anyone's got any questions for me, or we can open it up to the public.
Anything for
Tom?
Tom?
One quick question.
Sure.
So when you were addressing this issue, and I do appreciate the mindfulness to
Yeah.
water, cost, all of that. Did you look at what a replat would look like at 6,600 or maybe a little more than that? I mean, 6,600 isn't super big. And I'll be honest, my perspective is that I have a house on 6,900 square feet. So that's kind of my perspective.
Yeah.
So was there a consideration to reduce the lot size without needing the rezoning or no?
You know, we based it on the models that the builders want to put in there and the setbacks that the town requires. So that's how we came up with the lot size that we wanted to use.
One more question to that. When you refer to builders, because I saw that somewhere else in the packet, is there going to be more than just Sage Homes building in there?
There's a possibility that there could be other builders in there. Right now, there's no contracts with other builders to purchase any lots. There has been some interest in it from DR Horton that's gonna that put together the water study for us because they have an expert that does that work.
Okay.
So in your report, it talks about improvements to Ronald Reagan Avenue and GW Bush Avenue. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of infrastructure improvements and transportation?
Sure.
Your-
Ronald Reagan first stops. I can't remember the name of the street on the McCullen on the west side. And from there, there's a barricade, or there used to be a barricade there. I'm not sure it's still there. And then it's a dirt road from there. So we're going to improve that road and pave it with curb and gutter. We've got some drainage improvements that are going to go on that road. And then if you look at the drawing up on the screen, the road will go just to the east side of our entrance on the north there. So that road will be improved. Right now, the drainage coming from the north was not constructed correctly, and part of the detention pond that's just north of the dirt Ronald Reagan is in the right of way. So we're going to be doing some improvements on that detention pond also. The way it currently stands, if there was a flood, a couple of the houses in the meadows there on the northeast corner would actually get flooded. So that will improve that situation dramatically. Down on the south end on GW Bush, again from McCullen to our far east property line, we're going to improve that road and pave that road at the same time.
Question about some of these outlots. I see an additional outlot on the new proposed plan C. So you've got A, B, and C. What are the plans for
So
those?
A, B, and C are actually not part of this plat.
Okay,
So A and B are not even owned by this developer. They were owned by the gentleman that sold the property originally. And he retained ownership of both of those.
Right.
C was reserved by a company that owned the oil and gas rights. If they ever used to exercise those rights, that parcel is it's still owned by, it'll be owned by the HOA, but they have rights to
right. She'll be
extract
undeveloped.
minerals from there
Yep.
if they
Okay.
chose to in the future. So, but it's not part of the new plat.
But when I compare these two, I see a park area, does not look like 4.5 acres on the north side. And the rest of this open space looks exactly like the old one.
That's correct. The original plan had this park on the north side. And we felt it would be better to move it interior to the development, so it's easier access for neighborhoods.
Yeah, which I love that idea.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm trying to understand is how did the open space increase by 4.5 acres? And that's the only noticeable.
So that park was actually included in the original open space calculation, but all the perimeter lots on the new plat have been reduced in size. So the extra 4.5 acres is around basically the east, north, and west side of the property.
Right. Thank you.
It's hard to tell on that scale, but yeah.
I don't want to say affordable housing, but will the lesser lot size increase or decrease some of the property values in that area?
I don't necessarily think it'll decrease the property values. And I think affordable housing is a tough term to use now, but we call it more attainable housing.
There you go.
Since 2018, the cost just for the construction of homes is probably in again, I don't want to say starter homes, but a lot of these are first-time home buyers, is increased by over $100,000 in that 5-year period. So these houses most likely are going to be $500,000 plus.
So basically same size floor plans that you've been building, just on a smaller lot.
Correct. And there could be different floor plans also.
Okay, anything else? We'll have time for questions too after public comment.
One more question, and this may be more of a you question, not a you question,
Yeah,
but back to the builder question. Are you the only one that approves what builders can build on those lots, or does the town have a say in that?
Actually, the developer, which is Sage Homes, Darren Roberson, he will approve the builders. And they will have strict covenants and design guidelines for the subdivision.
Okay, well, I live on the east side of the highway without saying what builder built my house, but I just want to make sure that the standards of houses that stand up properly is adhered to.
Well, the
That
town
would be
has
okay.
updated all their building codes. I don't know how long ago you moved into your house.
2017.
So not that long ago, but I think you guys have adopted new building codes since then.
The town's adopted the 2018 building codes. All of our builders are required to meet the same minimum standards. I think there are certainly some questions about development practices, how long warranties are good for, and some other things that the town doesn't get involved between a builder and their clients. But all builders in the town of Wellington have to meet the same minimum requirements. To your question, Ms. Cholet, the town is not involved in selecting builders for subdivisions. The town's process is through our regulations, which includes development proposals. So if the preliminary plat advances to final and it gets ultimate approval, the lot layout that's approved by the town is what has to be adhered to. You can't change that without the developer coming back and requesting redevelopment proposals, which is where we're at today. So there's a process for making changes to the development plan. Once a development plan is approved, the builders buying lots and building homes in there follow the same building codes that all the other builders do. So there's little town involvement in selecting the appropriate builders for those subdivisions.
I can tell you that Sage Homes has built Sage Meadows, and D.R. Horton has built in there, and they made them change the design of some of their homes to meet their design guidelines and covenants. So I'm sure they'll apply the same type of thing with other builders if they go into Saddleback.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Okay, so you had said for R2, 6,600 square feet
Correct.
is the minimum
Is the minimum
for
lot
R2.
lot size for detached units.
Okay.
I'll also point out, because I think this might be the crux of one of the issues. The developer had asked some similar questions of staff when they were presenting some ideas for this proposal. I think the other piece of that is that the minimum lot size is also coupled with a minimum lot width. The minimum lot width for the R2 zone is 60 feet wide. And I think maybe Tom, if your team can speak to the impact of that additional couple of feet per lot and
Yeah.
what you're looking at for your design intent.
So most of the lots that we have proposed here are 54 feet wide, so they're a little bit narrower than the R2 requirement, but R3 allows you to go down to 50 feet, I believe. And the average home or lot size is 6,517 square feet. So there are some lots that are smaller, but the average is still close to the 6,600 that's allowed in the R2.
Okay,
What size
That's-
home? would you-
that's good clarity.
Excuse me.
What size home? Put on that.
I couldn't tell you that, to be honest with you.
I could probably speak to that briefly, just as an overview. I live in Sage Meadows, so this is the most recent, obviously, development in Wellington. And there are lots in Sage Meadows, either, I guess, Darren, you could correct me if I'm wrong. There are some lots smaller in Sage Meadows than what we're proposing here tonight. And they still have 1,500 to 1,800 square foot, single story ranch homes on them.
Yeah, and I believe some of the homes are 2,300, the 2 stories or larger.
Can you tell me the smallest lot in your proposed new plat?
I believe it's in the report that I put together, but it was 5,900 square feet. And we realized afterwards that was a error that the engineer made. And I think it's about 6,000 is about the smallest.
Chairman, I had one question. I wanted to clarify. I think it was on Mr. Carmen's comment about the number of outlots. And I didn't notice it until I'm looking at the old graphic here, but this image was put together at a time before that outlot C was created. And yeah. I don't know the date for which this color rendering was put together. You can see it's got a few more wrinkles than the newer one. But that outlot C is on the existing plat for Saddleback subdivision. You might see it you're the closest to the map. So yeah, I wanted to highlight that that's not a change that's being proposed. That came about as Mr. Dugan pointed out, the owner of the subsurface rights waited until the public hearing to say, we also need this. So the applicant and town staff had to react quickly to that outlot designed to meet their subsurface rights. I would also point out that in 2018, when that was approved, the outlot C is a 400 by 400 square, which met the minimum requirements for oil and gas setbacks at the time. Those oil and gas setbacks have since been rewritten by the state. So that outlot C under that 2018 approval would not satisfy the oil and gas setbacks of today. So it's possible that the subsurface mineral rights owners, if they're still engaged, might wait until the final plat hearing to again file a similar, I think they call it a notice or an objection. I forget how it's worded in oil and gas language, but we're anticipating there might still be some communication received from the mineral rights holder.
Right. And Cody, can I let you know, we actually did receive a letter from them and they said they had no objections. And
Oh,
it's from,
thank you.
and I'll give this to Cody right now.
Thank you. I hadn't seen that yet. That's right. Yeah, thank you.
That's being treated as low maintenance, open space area right now anyway.
That's
Right.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, and just kind of for intents and purposes too, we don't have a topographical map in your packet, but just kind of scale of reference. This is a pretty big hillside here that doesn't really lend itself to development. I think there's some soils issues over here too that may not be suitable for development. And it's touched on in the staff report. And it doesn't show graphically here, but well, it does a little bit. Part of the existing plat conditions for this subdivision, they are required to extend roadways for Ronald Reagan Avenue and for GW Bush on the south end. They have to improve those to the county or the town's development standards for, I think, the collector, minor collector, and arterial for GW Bush. And that included some widening of GW Bush beyond what was required because to meet that section road. Also of note and not shown graphically, the developer is also responsible via our development agreement with the town to include water line loops, oversize the sewer line for future growth to the north of this subdivision. So there are some significant development requirements placed on this property that the town has partnered in the cost sharing to that development agreement that we're going to make sure that those numbers are right moving forward if this advances. But I also wanted to particularly note this this portion of Ronald Reagan going east. As Mr. Dugan mentioned a moment ago, it's proposed to be constructed to the first street into this subdivision Roping Way. And it's proposed to stop there for the development purposes. The development agreement contemplates, because this roadway is not likely to go straight up a hill, usually you follow the contours of your topography to make the road grade something that's maintainable. We anticipate that road alignment is not going to go straight east here. We also have the edge of the town's current growth management area near Indian Creek floodplain here. So we really don't anticipate this road going straight up a hill at the current design parameters. We anticipate it kind of curving north through the adjacent property as that property comes in for a development proposal. But what staff worked with the developer in this development agreement was to try to avoid this scenario where the new development is responsible for paving all the roads that should have been accomplished by a prior subdivision. In this case, the Meadows, at the time the town was going through review and approval and recession, staff couldn't figure out, was it missed? Was it not a requirement? Did it just not get done because of the 2005 to 2008 recession? Whatever the scenario was, we said we don't want that to happen again. And so what the development agreement for this subdivision says is that the developer will provide an escrow funds for the future extension of Ronald Reagan Avenue. There's also escrow funds for water and sewer extensions to the edge of property line, so that there's money available when the adjacent property someday comes to develop, that they're not then responsible for tying through an existing subdivision to get the utilities and road improvements necessary to support that development. It's trying to make sure that all the development proposals are more equitable in the future and don't have lasting impacts on home buyers.
I have one more question for you. Just doing the quick comparison in the center section where the park was moved into the subdivision, which I like that, by the way. Previously, there were 31 lots. There are now 40. That's a 30% increase in the number of lots just in that center section. When I look to the west, these outlots, originally there were 25. There's now 39, which is an increase in 56% of the number of lots. So my question is I like, well, my comment is I like the variety of lot sizes, okay? But to go from 153 to 211 and to cite a water concern, I don't really get it. I can't, that doesn't compute for me. So I guess I'm wondering, was there any consideration for more open space? For example, another park on the south end of this property? Because right now the park for the subdivision is on the north end, but if I live on lot 44, I get a little trek to get to the park. So was there any consideration for doing something like that?
So in reality, no, we didn't consider that. What we did is we were, the main goal here was, well, there were two main goals. One was to make the homes more attainable and affordable for the people that were buying them. And the other was to reduce the amount of treated water that was being used for irrigation. So the perimeter lots were actually larger, the largest lots on the original plan. And that's why you see the larger percentage of reduction. The other thing I want to bring up is the town code requires one pocket park per 200 homes. So we put in one pocket park or neighborhood. It's not a neighborhood park. It's considered a pocket park. And then we have a considerable amount of open space in the project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hang on. I'm gonna hold questions by the board right now. We've got a handful of people that are here specifically for public comment. So we'll have some time to get to more questions afterwards. Let's give these folks a chance to speak. Thank you, Mr. Dugan. You may be called back up here to answer questions later. So this is the public hearing portion. Obviously, I'll go ahead and open it up. I have a sign-in sheet. I'm just gonna call your names as they were, as you guys checked in. Forgive me ahead of time if I butcher your name because of the handwriting. You'll have 3 minutes. When it's your turn, just come on up to the podium, and the timer will start behind me. So the public hearing portion is officially open. First one up is Nick Johnson.
How you guys doing? I live in, the Meadows actually directly to on the very east side. I guess my argument on this would be that, the argument of water usage is kind of mute. I mean, yeah, you're gonna reduce the number of, the size of the lots, but you're gonna increase the number of homes. And the increased open space, I don't know if that's gonna be irrigated or not. And so you're gonna look at 58 more homes who are gonna use, I don't know the average of water, but it's gonna be significant. And actually the population density, there was a study done actually in University of Akron, Ohio in 2016, I believe, that shows that population density increases actually negatively impact the area as far as property values, utility usage, which of course being Wellington, we all know that water is a key here. I guess my concern is that, and no offense to Sage Homes, I feel like this is a profit request by them. They want to make more money, more homes, more money. The original plan in 2018, just the increase in home values since then is going to increase their profits greatly. And I guess the rest of the town in our development is also the same zoning as originally proposed. And I'm trying to understand the need other than profit, why you would want to propose a higher population density. I think that's all I got.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Next up, Bill Emery.
Thanks for letting me talk. I live in Park Meadows. My house faces off of the dirt road of Ronald Reagan, right on the end. I have a lot of concerns. Number one, with 211 units going in, we've only got 2 access roads to the frontage road. We've only got 1 access road to Interstate 25, unless they go south to Budweiser. And of course, we all know at Budweiser, they have a lot of 18-wheelers stacked up there on the overpass, which is going to cause issues. Right now, we've already got backup at the light at the Wellington exit. And this is going to even cause worse damage unless we have other access areas developed to I-25. That's my main concern. The other concern I have is my house is right there on the end where the basin is. There's a large drainage road or drainage ditch that empties into that basin. Now, how are they going to fix that to where they can put a proper road in that's going to enter into that north side of the estate? That's my concerns.
Okay, thank you, Bill.
Mr. Emery, I'm sorry, I was taking notes, and could you repeat where the drainage concern was that you identified?
Okay, at Ronald Reagan ends at McClellan. So east of McClellan is there's 2 basins, one at the corner of Ronald Reagan and McClellan. And then there's a large drainage ditch that runs south of the homes on Park Meadows to another drainage ditch or another basin. And of course, I think it empties out into a drain area to where they're going to be putting in the estate, the new estate. So my concern is, what are they going to do with that road? Are they going to properly fix the drainage? And if they do, if they close in the basin, then that's going to open up flooding from the hills down into the Park Meadows area.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Next up, I think it's Lapole, Chris Lapole. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I lived in the Meadows for a couple of years, and I kind of have the same question as Mr. Emery here about getting in and out of the neighborhood. And I wonder what the town of Wellington, if they're financially going to improve coming in and going out with the change in zoning. Is that going to have a greater effect in the future? I guess that's my question.
Thank you.
Is the town of Wellington planning on improving the overpass? Can you answer that?
We can't right now, but we can address it in comments and questions afterwards.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, sir. Okay, next up, Tom Childers.
I've got the same things everybody else, major concerns of water. Right now, we're reduced to 2 days a week. Everybody in the Meadows is looking at $15,000 to $20,000 loss of plants and vegetation, which lowers the property value. Also, the traffic is a major issue because we got everybody now, it's already impacted with traffic, and the sewer, we're going to build the sewer plant and the water plant, but are they big enough to handle what you have for in the future? Or is it like everything else? Okay, it's good for here. We built to it and then we're starting over again. So I have a question on, did we design it big enough for what we have in the future, or are we just pacifying like we have been? Because I don't mean to be rude about it, but the planning of cutting back to 100 permits didn't work. Because like I said, I'm looking at a lot of money for plants and vegetation in my house, so.
Thanks, Tom. Last is Christy Wagner.
Thank you. In addition to the traffic, which will increase tremendously with this development, on the frontage road and the bridges, which we know are not in good shape anyway. And the traffic light, which I have sat there through 3 lights before I get to go. And I'm patient and that's fine. But when you add another 200, 300 cars in that area, that's a lot more traffic. The water, in addition to what other people have said about the water, we have a lot of water that runs through our subdivision in the meadows. I live on Sumner. And this proposed area, this water with the density of houses and less lawns, there's not as much yard area to soak up water, whether it's from sprinkler systems or rain, which we've been getting. And you know, how is this water going to be taken care of as it goes through the subdivision? So I would have a concern about that. And this is a big concern of mine. We do not have a fire station on the east side of town. With the higher density of houses, we would hope that there wouldn't be any fires. There was a fire a block from us a few years ago that burned a house down and damaged the next one. We know we have the Wellington Fire District here in town that has to get over to our subdivision if there is a fire, but we have no other fire protection on that side of the interstate. So I would wonder about that. As far as the parks, I don't know if this park would have anything for children. These types of homes would probably encourage young families to buy there. And it would be really nice to see maybe some more options for children in that area that some of the other developments have. And I would just suggest that until the water issues, the traffic issues, the fire protection issues are addressed, I would encourage you to deny this request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Anybody else wish to speak that didn't get a chance to sign in? Going once, going twice. Okay, the public hearing portion of this is closed. Okay, Cody, how much time do you need? A couple more minutes for note taking and answer formulation?
I think I've got my notes made. There were a couple things that I can circle back to and help provide some answers or some context. I think the applicant might be able to as well, but I'm prepared to move forward. I don't think I need any additional time.
Okay, let's just keep the same format. If you want to go ahead and answer some questions that are more in your wheelhouse, and then we'll have Mr. Dugan come back up and do the same.
Okay,
Okay.
certainly. Just kind of going through what I heard, a couple of things I wanted to respond with some additional information. And not in a particular order, but kind of as they came up. There was a concern about only 2 roads accessing and impacts to the interchange at I-25. The town did require a traffic impact study for this particular subdivision when it was originally presented, and we've required that be updated and amended for the new proposal to increase the number of lots. The town contracts with a third-party traffic engineer specialist to review traffic impact studies, and they looked at both the old study and the new study, and they concurred with the findings. The original development proposal contemplated road improvements for Ronald Reagan and GW Bush, as well as the internal circulation roads, and those are already required. The proposed increase in the number of lots did not result in any additional road requirements for this particular subdivision. We recognize that the I-25 interchange is a very acute problem for residents on the east side of the highway. The nature of one proposal doesn't significantly move the needle on that existing condition. We know it's a problem that's going to continue to be something the town takes to CDOT to work with them as a partner to help find and provide solutions to that. But those are not readily available, and nor is that project high on CDOT's priority list. So town staff is continuing to work with CDOT to make that a higher priority for our community. There was also a comment about a couple comments about drainage, and I might try to address those collectively as opposed to independently. One of the questions was about the existing drainage along the east side of the subdivision. Another comment was about the increase or development of the property resulting in additional runoff, and changing the lot density for even more units would further create additional runoff and drainage. I'm going to go back to sharing the screen here for a moment. And I'll use there it is. I'll use this colored rendering graphic, just, I think it helps illustrate, and that's what we were looking at just a moment ago. So to speak to the drainage, town staff is aware of an existing condition here at the north end of the property where Park Meadows and the Meadows kind of come together at Ronald Reagan. Part of the original development agreement and the existing development agreement for this property contemplates that existing condition. The developer is required to not only handle any additional runoff from the site development, but they're also required by that development agreement to improve this existing condition to accommodate this flow better. Staff had identified a concern that Ronald Reagan Avenue needed to be designed in such a way that it would allow passage of those stormwater flows past the roadway and not create a dam. We don't want to impact drainage north of Ronald Reagan. And we're also identified some concerns with the way drainage was flowing along the Meadows. So what you're seeing here, this is open space. Maybe if I even zoom in a little bit further. This area here includes a sidewalk and trail connection for recreational and open space purposes. That's, you see this kind of this gray shading. This whole tract here that constitutes the open space is really a big swale. It's a U-shaped channel to accommodate both the on-site drainage, so that when this property gets developed someday, the drainage for the site is required to handle all of the stormwater created from this site. It's also required to handle all the off-site flows that pass through the site. So the historic flows have to be handled here. So this is a pretty significant, it's not existing today, but it's designed to be a pretty significant U-shaped channel to handle the expected stormwater flows as well as the historic conditions and off-site flows coming through this property. That water is conveyed along the west side of this subdivision, east of the Meadows, and the south end of the property includes 2 ponds to detain those flows on site before releasing at historic discharge rates. There were some other questions on traffic. There was a question about will rezoning to R3 have other broader impacts on density in the future. And that was I had alluded to this earlier in the presentation. Staff is really looking at the rezoning request and the replat request as one development proposal. And when we say that those two should be integrally tied, the town has to approve any changes to a plat. A plat's a legal document. It outlines the lots that homeowners purchase. It defines the open space, the tracks, the road right-of-way dedications, easement dedications. All of those are a legal document. And it's relied upon by the town, current staff, future staff, homeowners, developers, builders. So any change to that proposed plat, the lot layout has to come back through the town for approvals. So our staff's intent here is to document that these two are being considered concurrently, that one doesn't operate independently of the other. And as I mentioned before too, if this development proposal was for multifamily, townhomes, condos, those more intense land uses, staff wouldn't support that level of density. Just not really appropriate for this far away from town center. Those densities aren't really supported by a street network and utility infrastructure network that's commensurate with the surrounding environs. the honoring the original intent, the original lot layout, keeping the single family detached nature of the original approval, and tying it to that legal document that is a subdivision plat. Our staff supports that approach, but not the highest density available through the R3 zoning. There was a comment about the sizing and timing of the water treatment plant and wastewater treatment facility. Both of those projects, the question was, have they been sized appropriately? Or we're going to be back where we started? And the answer to that question is they have been sized appropriately to handle town growth. Most of us who were here, probably all who are here in the audience tonight, have been through the town's processes for reviewing and updating our water utility costs. A couple of our planning commissioners were involved in the rate studies that took place, the public comments that were associated with that. And it was not an easy process. It was certainly one that the town took very seriously, and it did result in increased rates for owners, to someone else's remarks. But those plants were designed for anticipating the growth that Wellington expects in the near future. Another component to that was timing. Based on predicted growth rates, which the town has the ability to help manage through our development proposals and development rate. Those plants are expected to operate with the current expansion project for a period of 15 to 20 years. And as those designs for those plants contemplated, what's the next step? So there's additional expansion plans that are contemplated within those water treatment plant and wastewater treatment facility projects that are not being constructed now, but we know what they will look like. And the timing of those is such that the goal would be to pay off any debt for those future expansion projects before they're needed, so that we're not putting ratepayers back in the same position that the town has recently tried to work its way out of. That's a kind of a long-winded answer, but the short answer is we've absolutely tried to accommodate everything that we know to do to help prevent that same situation from occurring in the future. And then I think the last couple comments that I heard, another question about the water that runs through the site. And I think I've tried to address that in my response on the drainage, certainly a valid concern. In that same comment, there were questions about fire station and fire access. So there's no stations east of I-25. That's true. The fire district does have a property on the east side that's undeveloped. It was contemplated for a future fire station, timing of which our town staff is not aware of for the fire district. But we certainly appreciate and understand the concern. One of the things that I might note from a town staff perspective, the development proposal as it exists in this presentation tonight, the density of the lot count is proposed to increase. The lot sizes are proposed to decrease from what was originally proposed, but all of those lots still have the same minimum setback requirements for fire protection services as any other subdivision in town. They still require 7-foot side yard setbacks. 7 feet on both sides of a property line would result in a minimum of 14 feet between structures, which exceeds the minimum requirements for fire separation. So we do recognize there were some unfortunate incidents east of the highway and some response times were delayed. But we, from a building code standpoint and setback standpoint, the proposed development satisfies the town's minimum requirements for separation. There was an additional comment about access to parks. Didn't really touch on it, and I appreciate the comment bringing this up. What was commented upon was changing the configuration for the proposed pocket park to make it a little more accessible and visible for public access and neighborhood access. The other piece that we didn't really mention was that this trail system that's proposed along the west side of this subdivision proposal includes an 8 or 10 foot, I'll have to go back to the design plans, but a significant off-street trail system between Ronald Reagan all the way to GW Bush Avenue and tie-ins connecting these proposed lots to that trail system. The trail also connects to what will be required sidewalk improvements along Ronald Reagan and GW Bush and tying into the existing public sidewalk system that would connect this subdivision to Wellville Park, where the ponds are, and also the Meadows Park on Ronald Reagan. So those are required sidewalk connections to tie this development to those existing public parks. I think those are all the things that I heard that I wanted to respond to, and of course, I'm happy to respond to any questions as well. I'd also point out that the applicant might want to respond to some of those comments as well.
The nature of the pocket park, somebody had asked the question, Christy, I believe it was your last question, just the nature of the playground equipment and the suitability for kids within that park. Maybe that's a Tom question.
Yeah, I think that would be fine if the applicant wanted to respond to that as well. I will note just procedurally to that remark, and thanks, Tom, for bringing that up. The development process includes preliminary plat for subdivision developments going through the planning commission. The planning commission makes a recommendation to the board of trustees on the preliminary plat. We're also scheduling for the town's, it's now PROST, Parks, Recreation, Open Space and Trails Board. The PROST will have an opportunity to weigh in on the proposed park and open space and trail connections as well. We're soliciting that recommendation from the PROST to also help guide the final plat process and the board's final decision making. So there's several meetings that have to take place for a preliminary plat proposal. The result of the preliminary plat, if the various entities all recommend approval, the developer moves on to the next step, which is refining the plans, updating those plans to address the comments and submitting a final plat. The final plat will also come back to the planning commission for review. Planning commission will make recommendations to the board of trustees, and the board of trustees will contemplate the final proposed plat, and they can either approve the plat with conditions, or deny the plat. If the recommendation, or if the board chooses to approve a final plat, they'll also be considering development agreement that outlines the requirements for the development, the infrastructure costs, who's providing what and to what design activity is required for the development to proceed. So sorry for the long-winded response, but I wanted to kind of help highlight that those are the next steps involved with the development proposal through the town's procedures.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. We'll start doing question and discussion with the board.
So this is for the developer, Darren. We talk about a 4 to 6 year build out period, and 1 or 2 phases. Can you clarify after infrastructure, if that's going to take about a year, an approximate number of homes that you anticipate building per year, or what those 2 phases or 1 phase may look like?
Yeah, we both know, but yeah, so this is already approved. We already have it at 4 phases.
Okay.
Depending on what the market's gonna do, we'll phase it. Or we'll probably either do it either in half, 2 phases, or really, we really worked with Cody to delay this project because it was already approved 4 years ago. And with the water situation, we delayed it. Now looking at the water situation, it just does not make sense to have 19,000 square foot lots that people can irrigate without a non-pot system. And you know, in our covenants, we're gonna actually, in our covenants, we feel like, and we're working with Cody, we feel like we can, in the covenants, control the front yards and side yards. And in the development agreement and covenants, we'll put in there that the builder must install front yard landscaping and side yard landscaping, so that we can really control the water, and the amount of water and turf that they're gonna have. We know we can't control the backyards, but we can control the open space and front yards and side yards. So we'll put that in the covenants and the development agreement. So there'll be extra water conservation.
So how many homes per phase, if you're gonna have 4 now?
I mean, so
Ish.
we can probably 60 per phase. So we are breaking it on the streets.
Yeah, we have to provide 2 points of access, so we have to connect the road from the north and the south, so it'll probably be an average of about 60, but it may be 70 or 75 and 40 or something like that, but that's kind of an average.
So this is probably for you guys and for you. I was trying to really quick scribble and do some math. And point of reference, I was not only on the sewer rate roundtable, but then the water and sewer rate roundtable. So based on setbacks and what I know was determined in a study for average indoor use, there's 58 more homes. Average indoor use in non-irrigating weather is between 3,000 and 4,000 gallons a month. So with that, going at the high end of 4,000 gallons a month, and if you're using more than that, you might have a leak, just as a public service announcement. That works out to an extra 232,000 gallons of indoor use. But you're reducing the lot sizes on average about 5,000 square feet, correct? Based on the numbers that you gave me? They were a little over 11,000.
That's probably pretty close, yes.
Okay. So 153 lots that are 5,000 square feet less is a reduction of 765,000 irrigatable land. Yeah? Does that sound about right? But 58 houses of more irrigation. It all nets out to my math being an addition of 415,280 gallons, but a reduction of approximately, if you say a gallon per square foot of irrigatable landscaping, which is way low, is savings of about 350,000 gallons a month of treated water from the town of Wellington by reducing this lot size. Does that sound about right?
Can you repeat your final calculation?
My final, okay, so based
Plus
on.
and minus.
Well, it would actually be to the benefit of the town. It would be approximately 350,000 gallons less water use by actually increasing the houses.
I might just want to mention on page 27, and this would be in the engineer's report.
Be
Please
scared,
keep the
it's like
background
scribble.
noise down in the audience. Please keep the background noise down.
Well, I just want to state to clarify in the report on page 27 of the packet, it says it'll show a reduction in saving of over 20 acre feet of town treated water for outside irrigation. An acre feet is what, 390,000 gallons or something like that? It's a lot of water.
Yeah, it is a lot of water for an acre foot. I don't know that exact number off the top of my head, but I think it would be certainly something that we can put some more information together from the developer's standpoint and from the town staff point. If those numbers are helpful for you, we can bring that back in a future meeting date if that's acceptable.
I just think that water is always one of those things that's top of mind when you ask anybody in Wellington, what's your biggest concern? If it isn't the traffic light, it's usually water, right? And so I'm kind of trying to look at this from a bunch of different angles, and just because I have a lot of background knowledge on Wellington water specific is kind of where I'm coming up with these numbers. And so I would just like some clarification that definitely it is a savings on the system, although you wouldn't be building potentially until after the new facilities are online, which are built for 25,000 residents, just so y'all know. Other question, can multifamily be developed on this without the permission of the town if we zone it R3?
The multifamily wouldn't be allowed to be developed on this lot configuration as proposed. That would have to, any multifamily proposal would have to come back with a new development proposal for town consideration.
Okay, and then who has the responsibility for improvements at the intersections of Ronald Reagan or GW Bush and the frontage road? Is that an improvement that's a responsibility of CDOT or the town of Wellington?
The improvements to the GW Bush and Ronald Reagan at the frontage road is typically the responsibility of development. It's not always one development that's responsible for that. That's one of the reasons why the town collects impact fees for roads is not always it's not always a one-to-one where one development is required to construct one improvement. Sometimes larger improvements like interchanges require more contributions from multiple sources. And so this development is responsible for providing the road improvements that are required as a result of this development. Some of the larger town-wide impacted roads might be a town CIP project in the future using impact fee funds collected from development.
Okay, so as a person who lives on the east side of the highway, I live closer to the light than most of you all. But my concern is when I go past those intersections, it's hard to see. Left-hand turners scare the bejesus out of me. And so I just want, from a safety standpoint, for everyone involved, and this may not be, I think this is an issue, whether it's 150 some houses or 211 houses, to be perfectly honest with you. And 2 feeders, so all of those people have to go in and out unless you go all the way down McClellan to Jefferson, which no one's gonna do. Rarely. I wanna know if the town can have some way to improve those intersections for safety purposes. I can't do anything about the light, but my concern is based on the traffic impact study, no matter what, it's going to be more traffic. It just is, right? And I'm a contributor to that traffic. And so I don't want there to be serious injury or death without us at least having it on our radar with a plan to improve that area for sight lines and acceleration or whatever.
So if I understand that, what I'm taking away for staff is we'll go back and work with our Public Works and Engineering Division to evaluate the existing conditions at the frontage road at GW Bush and Ronald Reagan and see, we can report back to the Planning Commission on what those improvements look like, if it's existing or required as part of the development. And if there's things like site triangles, that sounds like maybe site issue is a concern, we'll take a look at that as well and see if we can report back some proposed either maintenance or potential changes that might be warranted for those intersections.
Okay, thank you.
Cody, is that an appropriate condition that this could potentially be approved with conditions? One of those being that the town provide town staff enough time to look into the site triangles, look into the safety concerns, and when this comes back for a final plat, assuming it passes the Board of Trustees, at that point, it comes back for a vote. So conditionally, that makes it a requirement to see it again.
Right, even if the responsibility ends up lying on a group of entities or the town or CDOT or whomever, that it is being addressed, that it's on the radar, that it is in the plan, because to add that many people, it's a big impact.
Yeah, I don't know that a condition would be required since the final plat has to come back before it can advance to approval anyhow. So we'll make some notes and we'll certainly bring back what information we find. I will throw out there too, that without looking at the existing conditions to know about site triangles and things like that, I'll work with our Public Works and Engineering Division to see if it's an engineering detail, if it's maintenance, because I don't know if those conditions warrant changes. But we'll take a look at it to see what is required from an engineering perspective.
Okay, one more question. On the trails, is there not an east side trail at all that would connect over to this trail? I mean, I see like a little green beltway between lots 31 and 32.
I can answer that question. We did the original plat. The owner to the east of the property has horse property over there. And they were concerned if we put a trail over there, that kids would come over to their fence and the horses would come over and there might be a conflict between the kids and the horses. So we eliminated the trail over there.
On the trail question, it is a typical requirement of development to extend public sidewalks and trail connectivity to the edge of the property line. So GW Bush would have sidewalk extensions as part of that design. And then Ronald Reagan, as we mentioned before, this what's graphically shown may not be the true alignment for a future Ronald Reagan Avenue. That'll be a future decision. We're requiring some escrowed funds to help pay for that. But that ultimate design, whatever configuration and path that it takes, would also be required to have public sidewalk connections going to the east for future development.
Right. I was just thinking back here and I get the horse thing. They walk horses in my neighborhood, so, you know. But I was just thinking there's like, I assume that's a green belt area.
It is, it's a native grass green belt back.
So for any use of any trail system, if you live over in that corner, is really kind of limited. And that's why I was asking for like dog walking or whatever people might choose to do.
They can still walk back there, not on the trail, but again, it was a request of the previous owner back there, so we'd eliminated it for them.
A question about in the current approved plat, what's the average home cost, would you estimate?
Yeah. I don't think the average cost of a house is gonna change from what we're building in Sage Meadows. I mean, you're still gonna build 2,500 square foot houses.
Yeah, let me try again. In the current approved
Plat.
plat, what would you say the average home cost would be?
I mean, I guess maybe
There's no right or wrong answer. I
No.
mean, I get it.
I think
but-
we have an 85-foot wide lot like we have currently.
Uh-huh.
We're still gonna build that 1,600 square foot ranch house or 2,500 square foot two-story house. But now by having 54-foot wide lots, we're still gonna build that same house. But the larger lot does not make sense without a non-pot system. My answer,
Nope,
I mean, what am I?
because I have a follow-up question. My follow-up question is, in the new plat, what is the average home cost, would you estimate?
Be the same. I mean, we're gonna build that same house, but on a smaller lot.
So just to clarify, there's not an additional cost for the increased size of the lot. In the old plat, you've got much larger lot sizes, but it's going to be the same cost for the home. So these aren't more attainable in essence. If they're going to be the same cost, it's just more of them.
Mr. Carmen and.
I mean, the
Ms.
price of
Moyer-
land would be increased, I would think, for the larger lot size.
So with the smaller lots, we are gonna be able to have a more competitive lot price, I should say. Right now, it's not feasible costs us the same amount to take the water, sewer, all the pipes down the road. But as a builder, we can't sell these lots we're actually gonna have to sell them for less than what we would in Sage Meadows. Because every builder's gonna be required to bring raw water for the irrigation of $30,000 roughly just for the exterior water requirement. So it puts this subdivision at a disadvantage compared to Sage Meadows or future ones with a non-pot. So if anything, we actually need to sell these lots to builders for at a lesser price. Because otherwise, someone's not gonna see the difference of a non-pot or a potable system. And the builder still needs to put in that $30,000 for the raw water requirement for the exterior water. Which if lots are 125 in both subdivisions, that puts these bigger lots at 155, 160. Just doesn't make sense. So now we're able to actually save that money being towards those non-pot systems to sell lots at a lesser price.
So
That
what,
help answer?
so do you see a substantial end user price decrease by the smaller lots?
I'm gonna try and answer that and maybe make it a little bit more clear. So the savings that we're gonna save on developing the lots, because there's more lots, street cost is the same. But you're splitting that cost now over 58 additional lots. But now each lot has to pay an additional $30,000 for the raw water. So it kind of balances itself out. So there's not a significant difference in the price of the homes, whether it's on the large lot or the smaller one.
So one thing that I just want to mention that the town did adopt a design guide for xeriscaping. I know a couple folks had mentioned that, and there's definitely, that's part of the land use code, and I believe your development will be required to, in the areas that not all areas, but those suggestions will be followed to talk about low, medium, and high use water areas and try to group those together in a sensible manner. So, I mean, I think that's the reality of the area we live in.
That's correct. And we're going to have strict covenants where we can, I don't want to say mandate, but we can require xeriscape principles for the front and side yards of every lot. We can't regulate the backyard because we don't have any control over that, but we'll have the builders will be required to landscape their front yards and side yards of every house.
And could you speak to the open space areas as well?
So the open space again will be all native plants and grasses, and we'll have a temporary irrigation system put in there to get the grasses established, and then a drip system to the trees and shrubs.
I don't know if you can, I don't know if Bob is on this meeting, Mr. Gowing or not.
No,
Okay,
he's
no,
not.
I had a question, and I don't know if you know this is more public works and engineering. Is there any update on whether the proposal to add the smart controllers to the existing I-25 interchange with all those lights, if you have any update on that? I mean, those are supposed to talk to each other wirelessly and help
Yeah.
increase efficiency there.
Yeah, so I'll provide a brief update. Our Public Works and Engineering Department reached out to CDOT a while back, and they asked about, they're called adaptive controllers. The ask was made by town staff, can CDOT take a look at this technology for possible use at the signalized intersections around the I-25 and Highway 1 corridor. CDOT responded favorably. It took them a little while to get going on it, but they were able to, CDOT was able to include some of those improved adaptive controllers at the intersections for these signalized lights. My impression is that CDOT has got them installed. They may not have them completely dialed in where they're operating to their highest efficiency, but that takes some time to get them to get, I call it dialed in. The adaptive controllers, what they are, they're actually cameras that are installed on the mast arms of the traffic signals. You'll see them right next to the lights on the cross arm. And they're cameras that are pointed at the queue lanes for the stopped traffic at a red light. And what those cameras do is they identify when there's a vehicle there and waiting, it starts a cycle so that it runs the lights through the queue and transitions, so it knows when vehicles are queued up and waiting, it cycles so that it allows them to move forward. Then when there's no vehicle in that queue, it sends a signal to the controller that says there's no more vehicles in the queue. It can cycle back to the other pattern, for the other cross traffic to advance. You see the cameras on the mast arms. There's a box utility pedestal out beside the signals that houses the controls for that system. So it's been recently installed. We hope to see some improvements to the traffic flow there so that the queue cycles are not quite as long. It should react it's just a simple form of artificial intelligence to react to existing traffic conditions so that when it's got long queue lengths, it'll help cycle it through a little faster. And when there's not a car stopped and waiting, it's allowing the other cross traffic to proceed. So we're hopeful that makes a significant impact. We know it doesn't solve all the questions, but it should, as it gets dialed in for better efficiency, it should make a difference. And we acknowledge it doesn't address all of the problems, but we hope to see some improvements with that.
This is not a question for this necessarily, but just as staff is communicating with CDOT about improvements to those access points, could you consider requesting or discussing some sort of widening with the fire issue being such a concern for a lot of people, if there is traffic on both sides of the bridges, there's not really space for a fire engine or emergency vehicle to get through. So just to include that as part of your conversations would be a request of mine.
Yes, I will see what conversations we can have with CDOT and fire on that topic.
On that same note, how difficult is it to get a left-hand turn arrow for those on the frontage road turning left onto the bridge going north? Because particularly when school is in session, that, I mean, sometimes the light doesn't trigger because people are stupid and they can't pull up to the white line. But other times it's simply everybody's going to work, school, all the things, and that can get backed up all the way to Baumgars because you have people coming south who are sometimes turning right, sometimes going straight. It gets very dangerous right there. Is it, how difficult would it be to have a left-hand arrow there so that that could alleviate that frontage road traffic? Because obviously everybody's turning right that's coming south. Nobody's going left to a dead end road. So
So you're asking for the northbound to westbound movement. Can that add a dedicated left turn signal?
Correct.
Instead of having to wait for vehicles coming south on the frontage road going through the intersection?
correct. Or turning right. I mean, that can get, you can have 10 cars waiting to turn right. And when they have those belly trucks, when they're doing the improvements on I-25, you can literally sit there 5-6 cycles because those trucks are going straight. They're not permitted on the highway. So they have to use the frontage road. And Lord knows they're not done with I-25. They'll never be done. So if that's
yeah.
something that we could do, that may be a huge benefit to all of us. I will align myself with the east side of Wellington when we're actually just trying to leave. That would be great. And then I just have a quick statement.
To that, I don't know what can be done. I don't know how simple or easy that task is. But we'll certainly ask that question of CDOT to see what can be looked at and what options are available to us.
Yeah, I think that would be a huge benefit. And then the other thing I wanted to say, as far as the Wellington Fire Department, they do own part of the vacant lot that sits in front of the Wellington Downs apartment. Is my understanding as of the last time I was at a fire department meeting, which they have once a month, that it is not their intention to ever put a firehouse over there, at least no time in the near future. So I would encourage you all to go to fire department meetings. There's one a week from Wednesday, 4 o'clock.
Is not the time or the place for that, thankfully,
So this is definitely
Back
difficult discussion.
in
here.
line with what we're supposed to be discussing.
And really looking at what our job here is to do and really making a recommendation and or moving forward with the Board of Trustees. We've heard a lot of comments, and I think a lot of the questions that I've had have been asked tonight. Some of my questions have been like, less lawn, but more asses and showers, sorry for that. More people in showers, more cars on the street, too, and more traffic. So I will say that for me as a commissioner, I am concerned about that, at how long that wait time is and getting on that interstate and the light and the traffic right now at this point. Feeling just kind of like we're cramming a whole lot more density into this area right now. I am definitely struggling with that and really trying to realize, the water balance and that we're all trying to conserve water in our lawns, zero scaping. We have on our comprehensive plan, we have recommended plants, what we would plant in our lawns, things like that for our area. So, I am struggling a little bit at putting an extra, 53 houses, 83 houses, 58, thank you, houses into this area.
Guys, very, very briefly, please. This isn't a question answer session.
Mr. Emery, Mr. Emery, Mr. Emery, could you please
Come
come
up to the
to the
mic if you would,
microphone?
Mr. Emery.
Thank you very much.
Now, each family unit usually has at least 2.5 cars. But when we talk about maybe 211 units, we could be talking almost 500 cars.
That's
Right, and I am in the business to have more cars in this town. But
Darren, do you have any final comments on anything?
I think, again, we've had a water study done. The site was, Cody, tell me if I'm wrong, was this grandfathered in where, we wanted to look at turf, the worst case? So we're really trying to focus on every house, the extra 58 lots and houses are gonna bring additional raw water requirements for the indoor. But some of these lots on these lot sizes we're actually above 0.25 required allotment of raw water. And yet don't have to bring additional water for the way it is approved right now for the exterior watering. And so we're really trying to reduce that footprint of exterior watering on a subdivision that was brought in 2018 that we thought made sense. But these lot sizes just don't make sense. Those big of lots without a non-pot system. That's really the impact. What we're trying to bring is be water wise and have a smaller footprint on our, more rooftops, more driveways, eliminates grass and turf, and that's what we're trying to do.
okay, what was the average size of your lot On the first-
Average size was
on the
10
first?
Almost.
11,300, somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, 11,000.
What's your average lot size in Sage Meadows?
What do you think? 7,500 probably?
I'm not
And-
sure there's an equivalency there because Sage Meadows has
We have non-pot.
a non-pot well water.
Good point, David.
Honestly, I would not bring a subdivision through today without a non-pot system in Wellington because of the required raw water for the exterior watering. So again, we were pushed to have bigger lots in 2018 when we started this site, but it does not make sense with a non-pot system or without a non-pot system.
You guys got to remember too, future developments all have, correct me if I'm wrong, the next couple that are slated to go do have non-pot systems.
Correct.
So if somebody's looking to move into Wellington and they don't have a specific timeline, this doesn't pass. We have an average lot size of 10,000 square feet that you're going to be responsible for watering with town water, or wait a year and you can move into the next phase of Sage Meadows and you have zero water costs. This development is not competitive with any other development coming to this town without the lot size reduction. It becomes non-competitive and it's essentially becomes a wasted development. Who's going to live?
We're not going to develop it currently just because the raw water required for the exterior water. A builder doesn't see that, if they pay a building permit of 60,000 or 90,000, this throws this subdivision out of kilter.
I get that. I'm not sure that this is the only option. Because I appreciate, my first questions going into this, looking at preparing for this meeting was about multifamily or townhomes, and I hear what the town's saying, but essentially, when I compare original with this is multifamily. It's just single homes, right? So for example, one of the things that my wife and I look at when we look for a home is we coined this when we moved to Phoenix a couple of years ago. Is there a jump risk? Is there a jump risk going from rooftop to rooftop? And if there's no jump risk, the houses are too close, they're too big, they're too close, and not really interested. So I think from my perspective, the water issue hasn't really been answered for me because we're putting 58 more homes, which is going to use water. I get the outside water use concern. I get that, but there's 58 more homes that are going to use water. And if what you're telling me is that there's two reasons for doing this. One was water use and the second was attainable, but yet there's no price difference, then there's no price difference. And there's not adequate data telling me what the total water use picture is. We've just focused on outdoor water. So it seems to me there could be another option for this piece of property. which might need to include looking at townhomes or something else. Otherwise, I like what you've done the first time.
So isn't there for water usage interior to the home, domestic water, showering, running clothes, running your dishes? I mean, isn't there an average daily equivalent? Is there something that planners typically, like there's some base number? And I don't know what it is, but it's based on some facts of how people use water. And I thought, I mean, that's calculated in, and then if you have exterior irrigation water, whether if it's coming from treated water, that's calculated based on square footage of, and this is not random. But more houses and less lawns means less water. I mean, it's a reduction in savings of over 20 acre feet of water, and an acre foot is 390,000. No, 325,000 gallons. So I'm not sure. I think this is getting a little muddled, but I think if your total water usage going down, which is what I'm taking away from that upper paragraph on page 27 of the packet, it seems like this development uses a lot less water, even though there may be more homes, but the water usage in homes varies very little across from January to December. That's a little bit, it's not static, but it doesn't go up and down like outside watering use.
Yeah, and I apologize. We have a water engineer that's gonna be at the meeting tomorrow night with DR Horton, and they're out of Nevada. And so they're working on the water savings for us. That's their engineering part of it. There is this map I can pass around that basically shows all the turf areas that we are saving by adding those 58 lots and making those deep lots shorter and more common open space. So that kind of shows you all the turf area that would be right now irrigated with the current development plan. So we're trying to save that. When they did the water analysis, tell me if I'm wrong, Cody, but they figured an average size lot of 7,500 when they figured the 0.25 acre feet required for exterior water. We're well above it right now, yet we only have to bring 0.25 acre feet
Right.
to the current development.
And I can speak to that. I think it dovetails with some of the comments from Commissioner Whitehouse and Carmen just a moment ago. But the town recently underwent a series of studies for water rates, appropriateness of water supply requirements, raw water dedication requirements. And the result of those, the town dialed in to a much better understanding of where we're at today for our water dedication requirements. So each home is required to provide the raw water at the time of building permit issuance. And that raw water dedication requirement is split into two parts, indoor and outdoor. And it's 0.25 acre feet per household for indoor and 0.25 acre feet per household for irrigation water, unless there's a non-pot system. If there's a non-pot, then typically the outdoor irrigation component is not, or the raw water dedication for irrigation is not a requirement. The 0.25 acre feet for irrigation, well, let me do the indoor first. The indoor component is 0.25 acre feet, and that's based on average people per household, average gallons per capita per day usage aggregated over a year's worth of time. So when the raw water is dedicated to the town, it's for perpetuity. The town receives the water right, and we have the obligation of providing that household with that treated water for as long as that household exists. The outdoor component is also a calculation. It coincidentally also is 0.25 acre feet. This was recently evaluated by our town engineering staff with outside consultants from Raf Dellis to look at all of our water dedication needs. But the outdoor component is also based on a calculation. It assumes an average lot size, and it deducts an average amount of rooftop and driveway space per unit across town average. It assumes the amount of irrigation water required for a turf lawn at 26 inches per year during the irrigation months. So those calculations resulted in the 0.25 acre feet per lot, which is based on an average lot size of 7,000 square feet. So and that's townwide. So those are the raw water dedication requirements. In a nutshell, it's also much more complicated than I can provide in a simple overview. But the assumptions used for how the town requires the raw water dedication amount is based on roughly what I just described, and that is provided when the permit is issued. One of the challenges with the large lot scenario that's currently approved for Saddleback subdivision for 153 lots, average lot size of 11,000 square feet. That 11,000 square feet is about 4,000 square feet more than the town's assumptions used to calculate the average outdoor demand. So there's already an imbalance there, and that's the average. There's some lots that are at 19,000 square feet is currently platted, which is very out of proportion. The town's structure for raw water dedications does not currently include measurements or a process for how to calculate something that's above and beyond the minimum calculated for town requirements. That's certainly a question that would have to be vetted for a proposal today. If a new proposal came in that proposed lots larger than the 7,000 square feet that the town calculates for outdoor demand, and it doesn't have a non-pot system, would probably be a different conversation now than it was in 2018, where the approval was made. Today, that would result in probably a different type of development agreement.
Ken, I'm not familiar. What is the current share price of North Poudre Irrigation Company water? Any idea?
225,000.
I just want to make a couple comments to what you said, Stephen, about appropriate use, and your jump factor. So correct me if I misstate, but regardless of R2 or R3 zoning, minimum setback is 7 feet from property line to building. Which means you're gonna have a minimum of 14 feet between houses. Even at an 85-foot wide lot, you could put all ranches because you could still have those just 14 feet. You could have sprawling ranches, you'd still have a jump factor that you were talking about. Multi-housing, multi-family housing, there's a 0 setback. And you would have more people per acre with an indoor average use between 2,000 and 3,000 gallons, which doesn't substantially decrease the amount of usage, but increases the amount of people using, and therefore increases your water usage on a multifamily housing. In addition, multifamily housing by design, by the intention, I think, of the land use code, and also the intention of the state is that it should be near public roadways for transit, of which we have little to none, and very little ways to even get across from the east side to the west side. So I would actually argue this would be the worst place to put a multifamily housing unit.
Yeah, and I'm not arguing for multifamily. My point is simply that adding 58 more homes increases the indoor water usage based on what Mr. Bird just said by 37%. 37%, because you have 58 more homes. So it's going to increase it by 37%. Reducing the lot size, there's a 3,500 square foot difference between the average lot size currently and the 7,500, right? So it increased.
It's actually like 5,000 square feet difference between the averages of the two.
Yeah. All I'm saying is I think there's another way to do it without necessarily this way. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like I've heard what I need to hear about it. So I've got my opinion on it, and we don't have to keep talking about it. We can move on.
As long as it's pertinent, we're happy to do discussion. Have you guys everybody basically heard what they needed to hear? Any other remaining questions for staff or the applicant? No? Okay, we've got a couple options for motion. Anybody want to take a stab at it?
Okay. I move to forward a recommendation to the Board of Trustees to approve the rezone to R3 residential medium density district and the preliminary plat for Saddleback subdivision first replat.
I'll second that.
Patty, roll call, please.
Commissioner Sholay,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Knack,
No.
Carmen,
No.
Caffrey's not here. Whitehouse,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes. I believe that was 4. Okay, Mr. Roberson, Mr. Dugan, thank you guys for your time. Cody, thanks for all that work you did. Okay, that closes out item A. We will move on to item B. Let me get back to my screen here.
Chairman, it's 8:25. Does anyone need a recess while we let people shuffle out here before the next agenda item? Or do you want to continue?
Yeah, we can take 5 minutes.
Okay.
Let's do 5 minutes.
The traffic issue.
You don't
No.
have to
you're going.
sign in. All right, we're back. All right. Let me get back to my page. All right, guys, we'll start back up here. Paul has as much time as he, no, yeah, you only have 3 minutes. Sorry, boss. Okay, hey, agenda item B,
I need to.
there's an amended site plan for lot 4, block 1 of the Wellington Business Center. Mr. Bird, if you're ready.
I am, actually, Mr. Whalen is going to present the site plan, and I understand that our applicant is attending via Zoom for tonight's meeting, so we'll queue them up as a panelist here on our Zoom call. It's not sharing. I'll get the presentation slides shared here. That was my one responsibility for this item. I had it open, it just wasn't shared. There it is.
Thank you, Cody. Good evening and thank you. The project, the application for you tonight is the Wellington Business Center Lot 4, and it is an amended site plan. It was originally approved, I believe, in 2001. Construction, I believe, started in 2001. The address is 6599 Buttercup Drive, and the applicant agent is Eric Larson with Summit Partners LLC. The request is for approval of an amended site plan in the C3 zone, mixed commercial zone district. Now, the site, as you see on the screen, is lot 4. Originally, it came in as, an application was lot 4 and 5. 5 is just to the south of the site on the screen. It's located in the very southern part of the town. I believe it's located at Wine Cup and Globe Flower. And again, it is part of an existing subdivision. The site plan itself, the applicant is proposing to take the building that's identified in yellow. That was, again, that was approved in 2020, construction started 2021. They're gonna basically add 20 feet to the building footprint, which is indicated in the red and the proposed, or should I say the amended site plan 2023. Pretty much everything else remains the same. The lot does not change. The other thing, the parking counts, landscape, everything pretty much remains the same on it, other than the expanded footprint. Basically, the shift, add an additional 20 feet to the south edge of the existing building footprint. And also, they're gonna add a loaded, covered loading dock on the very far west side of the property. Let's see. And the landscape plan, there we go, the landscape plan. Again, just a color rendition. What we've asked the client to do is to add some additional evergreen trees along the low flower street to
kind of screen the activity behind the building or along the loading dock, the loading bays and so forth on the backside of the building. And again, that area is between, the proposed building on lot 4 and the existing building on lot 5. Those bays and loading docks back up to each other. So that's kind of a service area that utilities, power, all that stuff is located in the backside where basically where the operations occur, loading, unloading trucks and so forth. A question has been asked about the parking islands. Code does require trees to be located on parking islands. There are 6 parking islands, I believe, provided on site. 2 of those parking islands have lights, and there was a conflict between having light poles on those islands and trees. Kind of defeats the purpose of having lights light a park and then have trees screen it. So we asked for enhanced landscaping on those islands that did not have trees that contained the pole lights. Other than that, not much else is occurring on the site. The architecture remains the same, consistent with the building on lot 5. Consistent with what was approved on lot 4 and 5 in 2021. So that hasn't changed any. The architectural characteristics stay. Also, the photometric plan remains the same as originally approved. And lastly, project approval criteria. Again, this is pretty much just a building footprint expansion, and the conditions, pretty much it remains the same as what was approved in 2021. It is consistent with the comp plan and the land use regulations. The lot and size are consistent with what is shown on the final plat. The plat hasn't changed. There is no infringement on in easements. Proposed grade is consistent. Density dimensions, not a approved PUD, so it's per straight code. And it is consistent with Article 5 for development standards of the land use code as well. So with that, myself and the applicant who's online can entertain questions from the commission. Thank you.
And Eric, we stopped screen sharing. So if you had additional information that you wanted to present, you should be able to unmute yourself and you can present what additional information you have as the applicant.
Good evening, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. I don't have anything additional. I think Paul did a good job of giving a summary of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Well, Eric's unmuted himself, but we can't hear you yet. Can you try a couple tests of the microphone to see if we can get your presentation here? Eric, your icon shows that you've muted yourself. Do you want to try unmuting and try a test of the microphone?
Can you hear me now? Can you guys hear me?
Is it a sound output on the other machine?
While he's working on that code, questions. For
Yeah.
Paul.
Can you hear me?
Eric, we're going to continue to try to sort out the challenges. We can see that you're trying to speak, but we can't hear you on this end. So we'll keep taking a look at that. Chairman, if you want to proceed.
Yeah, Paul, my only question was the 20-foot expansion to the south, that doesn't restrict traffic circulation between the two buildings. to any degree that it's out of standard.
That was, excuse me, that was a question I also had as well, as far as the big trucks and so forth. And the applicant did do don't quote me on this, but he did like a truck turn-in radius study or whatever, and he said it was not an issue.
Okay.
But that was a concern of staff as well.
Sure. Yeah, that's honestly the only, with blowing it out 20 feet to the south, that was the only concern I would imagine we would have with this. Photometrics, everything stayed the same from the original site plan. Increased buffering, even.
Yep.
That was a good call by staff.
Actually was the boss.
Can you hear me?
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
I was trying to look, I think it's, well, it says 4 on the drawings, but it's the civil construction plans. So it's really like page 7 of these drawings. I have no idea. Oh, it would be page 51 of the packet. That helps you. It shows the outline of the lot. And then, as I understand it, it's covered loading docks. And it looks like the cover goes just a little outside the lot line. Are both of the, so 1, is that correct? And then 2, are both of these lots owned by the same person?
Correct. They are owned by the same person, and that question was raised by staff with the applicant about possible infringement upon that lot line. I was assured by the applicant that graphically it shows potential infringement, but he mentioned that it does not. But that was an issue staff had as well, about crossing that property line. And yeah, it is owned by the same applicant. I even went so far as to ask for a consent letter from the applicant to the applicant, owner to owner, in case they ever sold the properties.
Yeah.
I wanted some kind of record that was, acceptable.
And did they give you that?
Not yet, no, that's something we're working out.
Okay. My only concern being if at some point lot 5 was sold or lot 4 was sold to a different owner,
Exactly.
just so that we're keeping the lines clean.
Yep.
I have one question. It's really a clarification. It looks to me like there's only one loading dock. Is that correct?
Yes.
There's one semi-loading dock, but it appears as though there are multiple garage doors. I'm not sure if it's visible in the elevation or the architectural, but it does show multiple garage doors and bays at the back on that side of the building. And these are, this is kind of a flex commercial
Yes.
business where I believe they're gonna have tenants come in and determine how big or what the interior services need. So there's gonna, there's issues, we gotta have enough parking spaces obviously on site so that if a more intense user needs more parking, we have that available. But my understanding is that they will finish the interiors out as tenants come along. Whoever that may be that is allowed that use in the C3 zone district. But some uses may have 3, 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Others may have 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet of interior. So we have ample parking. But again, the uses and so forth, the bays and so forth, we're not, those users of those bays have not been identified yet.
Any other questions? Have we given up on the applicant? He may not be required to say anything.
Can you hear me?
Well, we're having
Yep.
technical difficulties. My reservation would be if there was anything that he wanted to share or respond to. I've just attempted to email Mr. Larson to offer we can phone in to try at least get the audio. Let's give him a couple of minutes to respond. I would, since he's it's not like he didn't show up. He's just on the Zoom call and there's some technical difficulties. So I would hate to not give him the opportunity to present his application. Let's give him a couple of minutes and Mr. Larson, I emailed you from the town of Wellington, Cody Bird, planning director email.
But I just have one question while we're waiting for that is if there's no current tenants, what's prompted the change in this particular design?
Good question. That I do not know. That may be something that the applicant needs to respond to.
Okay, thank you.
I would guess he's got at least one tenant lined up.
Yeah.
That's probably
It could,
that needs a loading dock and then probably a slightly larger storefront. One tenant and then the rest, you've been to the business park, obviously. It's kind of how that works down there.
Well, also, I mean, if you could increase the sellable or leasable footage and still maintain all appropriate setbacks and circulation, then that seems that you would just standing here thinking like, well, that would be more income, so.
Or building costs too.
Well, and it might offer potential extra tenants, which is, we like commercial business here, so
We're all wrong. He's gonna come back with something totally different.
we're just guessing.
That's heavy industrial.
I know nobody else cares for the nuggets and shoulders.
Me too, hopefully.
This is dedication.
Is it win tonight or they win it? They take it all tonight? Is it?
This is Cody Bird. Sorry to call you from an unknown number. I'm gonna put you on speakerphone here next to the microphone so that we can at least hear you and hopefully you can answer some of the questions we've been asking. Would that be all right? Okay, very sorry for the technological difficulties. Eric, you're on speakerphone now. Hopefully we can hear you.
Does this work?
Yes, it's working.
Okay.
Says it's gonna get.
Well, my apologies for any issues. Hopefully they're not coming from my end, but I appreciate everybody's time this evening. And I think Paul did a great job of giving a summary of what we're trying to accomplish here on this lot 4. And I heard some questions regarding the property lines and setbacks. I don't really think there's really any issue. I think if you look at the overhang on the dock, it does come close to the property line on the south, but it does not encroach upon it. The only thing that's really marginally in the property boundary is the gates of the trash enclosure on the plans.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, just for clarification, everything is contained in the site. Yes, okay. Solid.
That's fine.
And then what other questions did I miss?
The traffic circulation is just expanding the south footprint of that doesn't infringe on any traffic circulation between this building and the one directly to the south of it.
No, we're keeping all the setback requirements per the town code to allow for fire circulation, vehicular circulation, etc.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then just curious on if there's currently no tenants, just curious what prompted the change.
Originally, this building was set to be the same dimension as the building to the east. And as they have built out the park, they have elected to widen all of the buildings in this development because that's what the tenant demand.
seems to be asking for. Allows for more flexibility in uses.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Paul or the applicant? Okay, anyone want to make a motion?
Public comment, is there any?
There is no public comment. Melissa? There's no public comment.
I move to approve the amended site plan for Lot 4, Block 1, Wellington Business Center, subject to staff report comments and the town engineer approvals.
I'll second the motion.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Scholay,
Yes.
Moyer,
Yes.
Knack,
Yes.
Carmen,
Yes.
Whitehouse,
Yes.
Sarter.
Yes. Okay,
Mr. Larson, thank you very much for your attendance tonight. Our sincere apologies for the technological difficulties.
No problem. Thank you all.
thank you. Okay, any communications or announcements from staff?
The next regular meeting is July, because of the July 4th holiday, being on or near the Monday, the schedule changed to July 10th is the planning commission meeting. We do have at least one application, potentially two applications on there. None of them are public hearings. They'd be site plan related requests. So we anticipate seeing everyone July 10th.
Adjourned.